It is time for another episode of Public. Let me get my music turned off. Hey, everybody, this is Chad Peevy, and today we're going to be talking about resistance. And maybe this shows up for you in all sorts of ways. We're going to talk about 5 different types of resistances and how resistance is what's holding us back from achieving what we really want out of our life, from getting what we really want, whether that's in our business or in relationships or whatever. Our resistance to moving forward, to creating change, to going through a transition or transformation, it is resistance that holds us back. And so it's really important for us to understand the types of resistance that we experience so that we know how to move through it. We can at least confront it and identify it and move through it. This is also helpful if you're a life coach and you're not sure how to help a client move through what they're experiencing. I'm going to give you 5 types of resistances that you can look for and help a client navigate. Now, when we think about resistance, resistance is, we're going to talk about resistance and from the Gestalt school, ideas from the Gestalt school. Now, I will confess to you that Freud gave us 5 types of resistance. Gestalt gave us 6 types of resistances. We're going to stay in the Gestalt world. That's just where I'm most comfortable. So we're going to stay in the Gestalt world, and we're doing this based on the method that I created called the Method for Transformational Awareness. So this is what we're looking at today. This is the method that we're working with. So as you're looking at the method, just to give you just a really, really quick overview of it, we have either transformation or we have change. Either one of those, whether we're looking to change or we're looking to transform. Transformation is absolute, by the way. That's how we think about transformation. Transformation is absolute. If I have transformed, there is no going back. If I have changed, change can happen in degrees. Change can always change back, right? It goes back and forth. Change is a little bit more fluid. Transformation, though, is absolute. There's no going back. When I teach this concept in front of people, I show them pictures of a tree. And when you have trees in different stages, different seasons, you have a tree in the fall that has, these beautiful, lush, golden leaves. Then you have a tree in the winter where there are no leaves and it's bare. And then you have a tree in the spring where there are blossoms on the tree. It's starting new leaves, new life coming to it. And then you have summer where it's big, full, and lush. Now, every stage and every season, it's the same tree, right? It's the same tree every season, but it's changed. And it's changed, and it's going to change again, and it's going to change again. Change is always possible. Now, think about that same tree, and now think about a wooden chair. That is transformation. Once you go from the tree to the chair, that's a transformation. That is absolute. There is no going back from the wooden chair back to the tree. And that's how we know that we've experienced transformation. So even us personally, if we're looking to make transformation in our own lives, there's a death involved. There's a death of the old identity, an old way of being, an old way of seeing ourselves that's just no longer possible. There's no going back. So when you hear people talk about transformational coaching, that's what you're looking for. You want to look for how are you going to not only help me become, but there's also this part of how are you going to help me kill off the old identity and my attachments to the old identity. There is a new flavor of Waterloo called passion fruit, and it's amazing, and I'm out. So transformation, if you're looking for transformational coaching, that's a question that you got to ask. Not only how do you help me become, but how do you help me kill off what was, right? It's just part of it. There's no going back. It's absolute. Now, standing in our way are going to be resistances. Let's go back to the iPad here. There are going to be resistances. Resistance lives down here in the model. You see that I'm in typical Chad Peevy style. Suffering is part of the equation because suffering is just part of life. And resistance is often the part of the equation that leads to the suffering. Okay, so let's talk today about resistance. This is particularly helpful for those folks who want to create change. They're hitting some roadblocks. They don't know how to move through it. Or maybe you're working with somebody that's experiencing some challenges moving through creating change or creating transformation, and they're not sure how to get to the other side. In the Gestalt world, there are 6 types of resistances. Type number 1 is introjection. Give me a thumbs up in the chat, in the comments, if you know what introjection is, or say, what is that? If you don't know, go ahead and plug it in the comment just to let me know that you're here, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm in all those places right now. Let me know in the comments that you see introjection. These are forms of resistance. We are resisting contact, okay? I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. We are resisting contact. The first type is introjection. Introjection says that I'm assuming their values as mine. I'm not going to be coming in contact with them. I'm not going to, back in Arkansas, we would say, you're not going to buck the system, right? You're not going to buck it. You're not going to go against it. You're going to assume it as your own. So this could be assuming the values of the family, or the values of the political party, or values of the church, or values of the culture. Instead of really searching for how you feel about it, you introject theirs. You allow theirs to become yours. And we do this so that we avoid conflict and we avoid real contact with ourselves and other people. If we never challenge the values that we have inherited, that allows us to kind of skate through. But it also prevents us from creating the change and transformation that we want to experience in our life. If you're not getting what you want out of life, and you got to create change in your life, it's going to require that you examine your values and determine whether or not they are your own. I wrote an entire book about it. Break and Untangle is about inherited mindsets. You're introjecting the mindsets of your family, politics, church, culture. You're making them their own. And by doing so, you avoid contact with who you really are, and you avoid contact by rocking the boat with other people. So it allows you to stay safe, essentially. The second type that Gestalt talks about, second type of resistance that Gestalt talks about, is that of retroflection. What that means is you are owning and accepting responsibility for negative, in this case particularly, negative happenings. What does that mean? Let's say something doesn't go your way. Something's off in a relationship. Something's not going the way you want it to. A way of resisting creating change in that relationship or transforming that relationship is for you to just own and accept responsibility for whatever's going on. You never hold the other party accountable for their actions. This is also a way of over-functioning. So I'm over-functioning in the relationship. I'm accepting all responsibility for what's going on. I'm owning all of it. And by doing that, I never hold the other person accountable or ask them to hold themselves accountable for their part of the relationship. And by doing that, we are resisting contact with the other person. So if I just take it all on myself and let you off the hook, I cannot rock the boat. Okay? I can avoid making what we call contact. That's the second type of resistance. If you want to create change, if you want to create transformation, you have to be willing to create contact. Ways that we don't do that: introjection and retroflection. Let's go to the next one. In Gestalt, there are 6 types of resistance. Here's number 3. Attribution. This means I'm attributing everything that's going on in this relationship to somebody else. I'm avoiding taking any blame. So it's the opposite that we just talked about in retroflection. I'm going to blame everybody else. Now, what this does It says I'm not assuming responsibility, but it also says I'm giving up all my power. I have no power in this situation to change what's going on. It's all their fault, and therefore I don't have to assume any responsibility for it. So I'm attributing everything that's going on in this relationship, in this situation, in this crisis, I'm attributing it to somebody else. There's no way that that's on me. And you can see how that also allows you to avoid taking responsibility or making contact with the other person, not because you're not blaming them. That's definitely contact, but you're not making contact with self. There are things in you that you're not taking responsibility for, and therefore you're not making connection or contact with who you really are. Because every relationship, it takes two to tango, as they say. We all play our part. And if I'm not willing to take responsibility for my part in it, then I'm not really getting closer to the other person. I'm just attributing all the blame to them. And that resistance is going to prevent me from making change or creating transformation. The fourth type of resistance that we're going to talk about is confluence. This confluence is when two people are running parallel to one another. Now, what does that mean? Let's say you and I are having a conversation, or you're having a conversation with your spouse. You come home from work. Hey, honey, how was your day? It was fine. How was yours? It was fine. Oh, good. Glad to hear it. Well, I'm going to go off and watch TV now. Okay, talk to you later. Right? There was never really any interaction there. We just ran counter to one another. Okay? There was never a bump in that row. We just ran counter all the way through that conversation. I'm sure you've had these conversations. It's when you're talking about the weather. It's when you use the word fine. How are you? I'm fine. We are not really making contact because we're running confluent with the other person. Where do you want to go to dinner? I don't care. Where do you want to go to dinner? Anybody ever had that conversation? You're running confluent to one another. You're not ever making contact. You're not taking a risk. And that's really important in all relationships, that you take a risk to say what you want, to say what you need. That's how you move through and create change. That's how you create transformation, is you take risk. All relationships require risk. So the next time your spouse says, what do you want to have for dinner? You say, I want Mexican, by God. I want Italian, by God. I want you to cook tonight, by God. That's how we create friction. That's how we create contact. That's how we touch and move through resistance to create the change that we want to see in our lives. Number 5 is we're talking about types of resistance. And specifically, we create resistance to avoid making contact. This is contact with others and contact with ourselves. And the 5th type is projection. Projection says what's true for me must also be true for you. What's true for me must also be true for you. So I never take a minute. Just thought of a really good example of this. I wish that I had more of my Waterloo passion fruit flavored water because I've got a granola bar in my throat. Yesterday, Pasha and I were listening to a podcast by someone that we knew back in Austin, and he was talking about how much he disagreed with some liberal politics in the city of Austin and what he would call woke politics in general. Those of you that know me know that I'm sort of an unwoke liberal. So I get it, but he was making a whole lot of assumptions that other people's experiences are like his. He said, an example was, he said, why would you ever pass a policy or a law that protected people who identified as LGBT in the case of housing discrimination? So why would you ever need to pass a law that says you can't discriminate against people who identify as LGBT? Now, this is a straight white guy, okay? Straight white guy. He doesn't realize, I'm guessing, he's projecting that everyone else's experience in this world is just like his. He's assuming that everybody else is having the same experience when they go rent an apartment or buy a house that he experiences. He doesn't understand. He's never put himself in the shoes of somebody else and thought their experience is going to be different than mine. They show up in the world differently than I do. He's projecting on them that the way he experiences the world is the same way they experience the world. What's true for me must be true for you. That's a form of projection. And when he does that, it's avoiding contact. It's not letting him see the world the same way as somebody else, which keeps him from getting close. In fact, it pushes him away from other people. It's going to be really hard to create change, create transformation with other people or with yourself if you can't see the world the way they see the world, if you can't experience the world the way they see the world. If you can't do that, change and transformation are constantly going to elude you. Projection is the fifth type. Let's look at number 6. We're looking at, in the Gestalt world, types of resistance. And the 6th type of resistance is deflection. Deflection. Deflection is very similar to Confluence. They're very similar in that you run parallel to one another. But in deflection, you're running parallel to one another by basically you're living in your own world is the way to think about it. You live in your own world. So it's not just that, hi, how are you? I'm good. How are you? Lovely day, isn't it? Yes, it sure is. That was a wonderful concert, wasn't it? Yes, it absolutely was. You're running confluent to one another, but deflection is when you completely live in your own world. So you're being asked, how's the weather today? And you're not even engaging. You're not even nobody is at home. You're just in your own little world. How's the weather today? That was a lovely concert. What? That's not what I was talking about. These people. They're a little bit clueless. They're not clueless because they're dumb. They're clueless because it's a form of resistance. It's a way of avoiding getting close to people. It's a way of avoiding making contact with other people. They're likely scared of making contact or taking a risk with another person, so they live in their own world. And by doing that, they resist creating change within themselves or with other people, and they resist creating transformation. So these are the 6 types of resistances that we experience, forms of resistance, when we're on our way to making change and transformation. So in my model for transformational awareness, we all enter this suspense stage at some point where we're thinking about making a change, right? Change is coming, or transformation is coming. And we enter this phase of suspense where we go, is that really what I want? Am I really going to make that decision? And we start weighing our options, right? We weigh the known with the unknown. Are we going to keep things the way they are? Are we going to do something different? And if we decide to take a risk and move forward, we enter into resistance. Now, sometimes, you may cross right through it. That has never been my experience, but I'm not going to say it's never happened. That you just move right from, I'm going to kill off the old identity and become somebody new and go right into a transformational outcome. I'm sure it's happened, but it's never happened to me. I always enter this phase of resistance and suffering. And it's really helpful to understand what happens in the realm of resistance. How do I understand my resistance? How do I understand it so that I can move through it? When you understand what type of resistance you're experiencing, then you can start to untangle, unwind, and make sense of what is it about this that I'm resisting? What's the risk that I'm really taking? Really evaluate your fear. Really evaluate what's actually going on. What am I actually afraid of? What am I afraid might actually happen? And when you can do that, that's when you're going to chip away. I'm not going to sell you a magic cure that you just plow right through it. Maybe for you, but it's never happened to me. But you're going to at least start to chip away at the resistance. And you get through to creating transformational outcomes, to creating change in your life, one little bit at a time. You're being blocked by resistance, one of these 6 forms. Identify which form you're experiencing and move through it, little bit by little bit. I wish you all the best on your journey. I hope that this was helpful to you. Make sure you leave a comment if you did find it helpful. And by the way, be on the lookout for my leadership development workshop. You will likely see an ad or a Facebook post about that. It's 2 hours of going through the model that I've just kind of hinted at here. I'll put it in the comments down below where you can register for that. But I will explain every bit of what's going on with every bit of this model in the Leadership Development Workshop. I do it live so that I can answer your questions about it. I teach for 2 hours. Then you get to ask questions. And by the way, it's going to cost you, wait for it, it's going to cost you $20.14. $20.14 plus 2 to 3 hours of your time. On the registration page, I explain why $20.14. Check it out. I look forward to seeing you there. There will be no public exposure episode tomorrow because Pasha and I are traveling to go do our camp in Austin, so I will not be here tomorrow. So until then, have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Take care of one another. Bye-bye.